Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Condi's Virtual Open House 2021. Welcome to the 3 p.m. Saturday presentation, which is the Pro 8432WT demo with Doug DeWitt. Let me go ahead and check my notes here. Yes, I am Doug DeWitt, Transfer Paper Product Manager here at Condi Systems. Welcome to the presentation. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that while I appreciate the fact, if you have any questions, go ahead and use our Q&A chat. If I've got time at the end of the presentation, I will try to get to them. But rest assured, I'm going to take the time to answer all of your questions, hopefully within the next 24 hours. So go ahead and ask your questions as we go along. But we got a lot to cover in today's episode, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. This right here is the Oki Pro 8432WT, WT standing for White Toner Color Laser Printer. Beautiful thing about this, especially compared to the alternative in the market, which is direct to garment, is that toner is dry, which means it doesn't expire and it doesn't clog. And unlike direct to garment, where you have to pre-treat your garments, especially depending on the material makeup, there's no pre-treatment involved with this process. As you can see, this printer is what I would call the mid-size white toner printer. It prints tabloid size, which is an 11-inch by 17-inch cut sheet. The unit itself weighs about 80 pounds. As you can see here, we've got it on a 3-foot by 3-foot desk. So you'll need about 3 feet by 3 feet of space in your shop to operate this unit. You also need access to direct power. You don't want to run these things through a surge protector or an extension cord because it needs to draw 10 amps to get up to heat to do its job. As far as this printer is concerned, unlike a lot of inkjet printers that you might be familiar with, color lasers have their own internal processor and their own internal memory. This unit comes with an 800 megahertz internal processor. It comes with 256 megabytes of memory, and that memory can be expanded to 1 full gig. It does have a USB and Ethernet connection, but the Ethernet is hardwired, not wireless. Sorry about that. It does print at a maximum 1200 by 600 DPI image resolution, and this unit can be configured in its natural configuration to run cyan, magenta, yellow, and white. So we can use white toner as not only an underbase, but as a spot color. So we can have white in color within our designs. Now we can also configure this unit where we can pull out the white toner in drum and install a black toner in drum. So you can use it as a standard 4-color process printer, as well as using it as a white toner printer. Now let's crack it open here so I can show you some of the things about the 8432. What you'll notice first off is we have a cassette tray down at the bottom, and then we have this multi-purpose tray that folds out from the front. The multi-purpose tray is where we want to feed all of our transfer paper. The cassette tray we just want to leave for plain paper. Now, if we open this up, I'll point out some of the consumables of this particular unit. Pulling this out, what we have is the toner cartridge attached to the image drum. So the toner is fed through the cartridge to the drum. The photoconductive wheel at the bottom of the drum dictates where the toner is laid out. And you've got 4 process colors: cyan, yellow, magenta, white. So white is the last color being laid down. Underneath these consumables, you have what's called the transfer belt. It's what physically moves the paper through the printer. So the toner dispenses to the image drum puts the toner onto the sheet. The sheet then feeds into the back of the unit here, into this mechanism, the fuser assembly. Now, I always say if the 8432 were a living, breathing animal, the fuser assembly would be the heart, so to speak. As far as these printers are concerned, they require very little maintenance. The only real maintenance that's required is keeping this fuser assembly clean. How do we do that? We feed our transfer paper using the proper media type and media weight. We should be fine. We can run a few sheets of plain paper through the printer before we get started, just to make sure that our fuser assembly is clean. Now, these black strips on the top, These are the print heads for an 8432WT. So no toner physically passes through these. The only thing that passes through them is light. Now, keeping these clean is another basic maintenance step you have to do. But what you have to remember is you do not want to touch these print heads with your bare fingertips. What you want to do is get a lint-free cloth, and I like to use our microfiber glass cloths, and we're just going to gently wipe in one direction. So there, we have basically performed the basic maintenance required for an 8432WT. So now that we've gone over that, let's go ahead and get this printer ready to start printing some transfers. I want to stay on the printer for a second because what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up and extend the multi-purpose tray, and I'm going to program the multi-purpose tray on the 8432. I'm going to hit my menu button. I'm going to go down to menus, hit enter. It highlights tray configuration. I hit enter. MP tray config, enter. Paper size. I'm going to be running some tabloid sheets through this printer. So let's go ahead and set the printer to tabloid. Little asterisks appear. It means the change is locked in place. As far as media type is concerned, we're going to start off using the Forever Low Temp Laser Dark. And fortunately on 8432s, there's a preset setting, user type 1. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now I've got my paper size and media type programmed. Media weight, I always like to scroll down and use ultra heavy 1. It's a good generic setting for most transfer paper that you feed through here because it ends up translating to between a 120 to 185 gram per square meter media weight. That's a lot to say real fast. Let's hit the back button one more time. Let's go down to tray usage, hit enter. Right now it says when mismatching. I want to go ahead and set the multi-purpose tray as a normal tray. Hit enter, asterisk appears. Hit the back button. We're back to ready to print. Let's make one more change. Let's go down to menus. Let's scroll down to print adjust and hit enter. And we're going to scroll down twice to transparency color setting, hit enter. According to Forever, we want to bump this setting up to +2 to maximize the output quality on the Forever Low Temp Laser Dark. So we're going to back out here. And now that printer should be ready to print. So let's go ahead and get started with the first paper we're going to feature today. We're going to feature the Forever Low Temp Laser Dark. And it comes in 2 separate sheets. An A foil sheet, like this one here, that physically runs through the printer, and a B sheet, which applies a white-based emulsion, but only where there's printed toner. Now, one thing you might notice is this film has what I'm going to call a frosted side and a glossy side. The frosted side is the print side, so we want to make sure that this is the side that we print to. Let's take a few sheets and let's go to our multi-purpose tray. We're going to open up the tray. When we're running the multi-purpose tray, you want to load your transfer paper print side up. So I've got the frosted side up. I adjust my guide bars to make sure the paper feeds in. Drop this gray handle here, and now the tray is loaded and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first project of the day. Of course, the 8432WT is designed to print to dark garments. Now, we could demonstrate a 100% cotton shirt. We can do that all day. We could put it on a cotton poly blend. We could put it on tri-blends. We could put it on other materials. But we're going to go a step further, and we are going to decorate a black 100% microfiber polyester shirt from Vapor Apparel. So yes, we're going to decorate this garment using a white toner printer. Why am I doing it? Because you can't sublimate a black t-shirt. Okay, so we've got our material, but we're going to throw in even a bigger challenge. I said that the printer prints on an 11-inch by 17-inch cut sheet. Well, what happens if we get a graphic that is too big for the output sheet of 11 by 17. Well, there's a little trick we can employ. It's about a $400 plugin. It's called IC Split. So Sprite, if you can get me over to the computer, let's show people how IC Split works. Fantastic. All right, so here we have our graphic in IC Split. It just happens to be David Bowie. How cool. Okay, we'll notice up here that the graphic is 12 3/4 by 16 at 154 DPI. So again, this graphic as is too big to print on an 11-inch by 17-inch sheet. But what we can do in IC Split is we can go ahead and select a page size. I'm going to output to 11 by 17. There, I have this magenta grid that represents an 11-inch by 17-inch sheet. Let's go ahead and set our second sheet, also 11 by 17. So when the two sheets are laid together, I have this channel in between the two where the image could be split. Now, normally, the more narrow the channel, the more the split looks like a straight line, which is what we don't want. We want more of like a jigsaw piece. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extend the coverage area of this sheet 1 inch in, and I'm going to do the same thing with the second sheet. There. So now, instead of having a 1 inch area to perform the split, now I've got about a 3.5 to 4 inch gap. So this should create the jigsaw effect I'm looking for. Let's go ahead and split it. And let's tell the IC Split program that we're going to a dark garment. And boom, now I've got my two jigsaw pieces that I can now reassemble as one solid graphic using the 8432WT and the transfer rip. So let me go ahead and save these. And I can save them as PDFs or PNGs, but I'm going to go ahead and save it as a PDF. Click Save. And now I'm ready to bring my splits into my Forever Transfer Rip. So let me jump into the Forever Transfer Rip. Okay, hope everyone can see the transfer rip. The transfer rip is basically the raster image profiling program that we use with the 8432WT white toner system. In fact, we use it with all of our systems. Essentially, what the rip does is it performs two key functions. One is it regulates the amount of white toner deposited by the Oki white toner printer. By default, the printer puts down too much for our purposes. If we lay down too much white, we actually lose color resiliency. We create thickness and it creates a very heavy feel. So we can reduce the amount of white toner. It also saves us money. The second thing that the rip does is create what's called a rasterization or a screening effect. In other words, what it's basically doing, depending on the screening that we select, it will regulate where toner is deposited on the sheet, basically opening up or contracting gaps, so to speak. These gaps allow the design to be more flexible so we don't have premature cracking. And when we wash and dry the garment, water flows freely through the design instead of butting up against a solid film. So it actually adds to the softness and adds to the image durability. The rip is performed in 5 basic steps. The first thing we're going to do with the rip is select our profile, essentially telling the rip what type of paper we want to print. I'm going to select the Forever Laser Dark No Cut Low Temp. And now it brings us into page 2, where we can load our image file. One thing to note here, and this is a pro tip, make sure that you select your proper page size before you click on Load File. But let's go ahead and load up a graphic here. And give me one quick second, and I will find that split There we go. You may not be able to see it on camera, but basically I got a pop-up screen. It's a navigation. So I went ahead and found the file. The green status bar means it's loading in, and it should appear on our list. So when I select it, you notice here as a PDF, it gave me both page 1 and page 2. So let's go ahead and get started on page 1. I'm going to click on page 1 and go into the third step of the RIP, which is the color management step. Now, in the color management step, I do have some basic controls, such as I can control the contrast, the saturation, the hue, and the brightness. Now, you can also dictate gamma channels, such as your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Some other nice features, and we'll show them to you. We've got a remove color feature, and we've got a substrate color background. So let me go ahead and get started with this graphic. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, I want to reduce that brightness a little, but I want those colors to pop. So let me go ahead and increase the saturation. Ooh, that might be a little too much pop. But every time we make an adjustment, we should see it in our print preview. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is remove a color. But before that, let me select the substrate color just so you can see it. We're going to be working with a black vapor shirt. So there it is. But you notice here, I've got this shade of black that doesn't necessarily jive with what we'd call a true black. Let's click on the remove color feature. I click on that feature and it brings up a dialog box like this. So now I can go in, let me select a black point, and it loads it in. Let's save it. Now, the tolerance here, by adjusting the tolerance, the higher up in the number I get, the more shades of black the graphic will drop. See here? So we're using the remove color and tolerance feature to knock out some of that excess black because we're going against a black garment. Now, here's a neat little feature. Right here, we've got manage color settings. Whatever changes I make to the first graphic, I want to make the same changes to the second page. The easy way to do that is by clicking on this and selecting Save Actual Color Settings. Again, it will bring up a dialog box, and we can go ahead and name our profile VOH. We save it, and now the same color changes we made to the first, we can apply to the second page. Let's jump to the next step in the RIP, which is our spot channel fill up. Now, to show you an example, if you didn't have the RIP, the printer would be laying down about 340% total coverage. So what you would see here is you would have an image that's caked in white background. Again, that dulls out our colors. It makes the garment heavy. We can choke off that amount of white. Let's go to 200% coverage. Basically, what this figure means is it adds up the percentage of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black to create a total percentage. So let's say you had a color that was 50% cyan, 50% magenta, 50% yellow, and 50% black. Well, that would be 200% total coverage. With this setting, we're basically telling the RIP, don't put anything behind that color. Why? The opaque base of the forever low temp will be white enough for that color. So in other words, if any color concentration is less than 200%, the RIP is going to fill white behind that color until the total value reaches 200%. Now, another thing we could do is we could get the printer to put down a double amount of white only where white is being applied by using the multiplicate spot color. This is a handy little trick if you're doing a white only graphic. But I'm going to reset this to 1, which basically means a single pass of white. Underfilling is the forever transfer RIP version of what's called choking, which is by setting so many pixels within the design before it lays down the white. This helps to eliminate the white edging that you might see sometimes around hard edges like the edge of a letter or edge of a number. This feature right here, preserve partial transparency, notice it gets rid of that hard line around the design. So that's a nice little feature there as well. So let's go to the last step, which is actually printing the file. I'm going to send this to my Pro 8432WT, and I'm going to ask for 2 copies just in case I mess up one. Notice we've got the mirror function on, mirror horizontal. As a note, the transfer rip will only work with portrait orientation files. So if you've got a landscape 11:17 image, rotate it 90 degrees in your graphic software and save it as a portrait, then import it into the rip, you'll be much better off. Notice we've got our screen settings. I'm going to open this up here. We've got screening from printer, screening as configured, screening configured as a mask for bright media, screening configured as a mask for dark media, and Micromask. Basically, what do these selections mean? If we use screening from printer, we're basically telling the rip not to do any rasterization to the graphic. In other words, it'll look just like it came out from the driver. Now, this would be okay if we're going on to a hard substrate with a hard surface paper, or if we need a color proof. But more often than not, we want to apply some screening effect, like I said, essentially to help distress the graphic to make it more flexible, soft, and durable. Now, screening as a mask recommended for bright media is like telling the transfer rip you're going on to a white t-shirt. So what it will do is it will knock out areas of white in the design. It will print areas that are black, solid fill, and then the screening effect is applied. You know, the lighter the color, the more screening. The darker the color, less screening. When we select mask for dark media, it's the opposite effect. We're telling the rip we're going on to a black t-shirt. So what the rip will do is any areas that are black, it will automatically knock them out. Any areas that are white, print intact. So the screening effect happens more going from darker colors and less on lighter colors. Micromask, which is a great selection for any line art, clip art, or vector art design, applies a uniform amount of screening through every color in the design. So for this particular example, what we want to do is select dark media, because again, we're going to a black t-shirt. Now the mask controls the actual size of the dropout dot. The higher the number, the smaller the dot. But since I'm going to be covering about a 13-inch by 16-inch area, I'm going to go with a little bigger dot than what would normally be recommended, because we do have a lot of surface area. Shadow tolerance is basically the control where you can knock out background and feature foreground. It runs from 100 up to 400. The more shadow tolerance we apply, the more backgrounding gets removed. Now I'm going to set my shadow tolerance to 175. The dot shape, I'm going to change the dot shape. I'm going to go with the Euclidean dot shape. This is kind of the factory default dot shape for the transfer rip. It will vary the size of the dot, basically selecting the best dot size for the graphic at all points. As far as the angle is concerned, since we're using the Euclidean dot, we'll basically take the angle at a 45-degree angle. Here's a pro tip. If we've got the multi-purpose tray programmed, which we do, if we set our media type to printer default and our input tray to automatic tray detection, basically we don't have to hit the online button anymore. We've got the tray programmed to run 11:17 forever low temp laser dark, so hopefully the job goes straight on through. The profile that I'm applying is the 8432WT profile for the laser dark no cut low temp. So let's go ahead and print our first transfer and get that job going. And then we got to go back into the rip and set up the second file. The status bar right here basically lets you know that the file is ripping. Of course, this is kind of relying on memory from your PC. So basically, if you keep your transfer rip queue clean of files, it should rip a little faster. From what I've noticed in my experience of working with the rip, the longest time it's ever took to rip a file probably about 2 minutes. That's not bad. I run a Windows 10 Home Edition operating system, basically an HP laptop. So, you know, depending on the file size, it should rip relatively quick. So while that is going on, I want to make sure that the entire file goes before I hit the back button. So let's take this pause to enjoy a beverage. Oh, I hear my printer firing up. No, we can watch it print the second time around. Let me go ahead and get back to the start. Let's work on the second file here. Again, because we got 2 splits that we have to put together to create the shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and load the second split into the rip. And hopefully this will go a little faster because we've done all the work in the first part. I can go to Manage Color Settings, Load Color Settings. Here's what the menu looks like. Let me select Bowie. There. All my color changes saved. I can just move on to the next step. 200% coverage, 2 device pixel choking or underfilling. And again, I want to make sure I preserve that partial transparency. I don't want the hard edge line. Let's go to next. Let's use the same settings that I did the first print on. And let's get that second print going. All right. Could everybody see my 8432WT?
Sorry.
So there's my first split. Front and back. And I've got an extra copy. That's cool. So let's go ahead and set up my heat press for doing what we call the weeding step. Now, first thing I'm going to do is let the bottom platen fall, or let the top platen fall on top of the bottom platen. I want to preheat the platen very first go out. I've got my temperature set at about 310 degrees Fahrenheit. When it comes to the weeding, we can weed between 310 and 330. My advice is to start low at 310, and if you need to, work your way up. If you ever see what we call clouding or snowing whenever you weed your transfers, in other words, excess white around the design where it doesn't belong, it usually means either you're going too hot or you're hitting it too hard. So like I said, we're going to start at 310. And here comes my second set of prints. Let me put one in the spare pile and one in the go pile. Okay, so my bottom platen's been preheating. Got my temperature set. Another little pro tip for you. Take your B sheet, lay it on that warm platen, and you'll see the sheet flatten out. In case you got any moisture in it, that might affect the way that the sheet weeds. But once we've got it dried out, I can go ahead and put the toner side against the coating side, like so, one over the other. I'm going to put the two together on the heat press. Got a sheet of butcher paper that I'm using as a protective cover sheet. And I press the two sheets together, 310 to 330 degrees Fahrenheit. Since this sheet is 11 inches by 17 inches, I'm going 2 minutes with the Marion step of the B sheet over the A foil. If it were a smaller sheet, like an 8.5 by 11, I could cut that time by 30 seconds. If it were a bigger sheet, let's say the 12.5 by 19 inch sheet, which feeds through your big okies, those you might have to go 2.5 minutes, depending on the toner coverage in the design. If you got more toner laid down, you're probably going to want to leave the transfers together a little longer to make sure that the B sheet is in contact with that toner. Now, what's happening inside of the press is that emulsion from the B sheet, it's going to stick to the back of the toner on the A foil. Wherever that B sheet emulsion and the A foil come in direct contact with one another, a chemical blocker in the film keeps the emulsion from sticking in that point. So that's what we mean by a self-weeding transfer. In the old days, what we'd have to do is run what was called an opaque film through a color laser printer or an inkjet printer. And then once the film was produced, have to basically load that film into a plot cutter or a vinyl cutter and physically trim out the design. That's picking, that's weeding, that's slowing you down. Basically, it doesn't matter how intricate the design is. With the forever self-weeding products, you can basically do the weeding in 2 minutes. So it's a tremendous time saver. Now, as far as the cost of the transfers are concerned, you're looking at about $2 per transfer. That's the A sheet and B sheet. If you're using 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, it's about $4 per transfer. For the 12.5 by 19, about $4.85. Now, as far as the toner coverage is concerned, and I'll get to that in a second, because I got some work to do. Let's go ahead and weed these two. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that my film sheet stays against that bottom platen, because the warmth coming off the bottom platen allows me to do a slow peel where I'm not picking up these individual dots with my B sheet. See, I don't have to basically rip it through to get it done. If you've done the process correct, you should see a perfect indentation of your image in the B sheet. If you do, let's go ahead and move to the next step, which is fixing the second side. Again, I want to take my B sheet, coating side up, lay it on my warm platen, let it flatten out. When it flattens out, we're good to go. Go ahead and take it, place it over the frosted side, the print side that has the toner. And I like to smooth out a little just to make sure my two sheets have good contact. Put my protective paper down. Same temperature, same time, same pressure, because we want the same result. Now, this is the sheet that we've already applied the emulsion to. Now, sometimes what might happen is the edge of that B sheet might catch the edge of your A foil and leave this little line. Of course, the easiest way to fix that is a pair of scissors. Now, by chance, if you don't notice it and it does get deposited on your shirt, no need to worry, because there's no toner bond there. That part will not bond to the shirt. It could wash off. Now, the easiest way to remove it is put a piece of heat tape over it and basically hit the transfer for about 20-30 seconds with the heat tape over. And when you lift up the heat tape, it'll lift up that excess white. Pretty cool trick. Did a little trimming here so that I basically have one design ready to go. It's time for an IBC root beer beverage break. Delicious.
Did you make your shirt?
I did make my shirt. Now, ironically, this is a full bleed sublimation shirt. This shirt is 9 years old, and I wash it all the time. And as you can see, it's just as colorful as the day I made it. And that's really the key. Since we're using this material, since we're using this process to decorate cottons, cotton poly blends, those materials break down over the course of time in your washer and dryer. So when the material breaks down, the graphic is naturally going to break down as well, because we're putting the graphic on the surface. With sublimation, since we're embedding ink directly into the polyester fiber, we're essentially dyeing the shirt. And since polyester doesn't break down when you wash and dry your clothes, That's why you get these durable designs with sublimation. So part 2, again, the trick is make sure the film stays against the warm platen. Go from one corner to the opposite, low and slow. That is the tempo. And we got it. So there's our second side. Rock on. So now let's get ready to make our t-shirt. I'm going to have to reset my press and drop the temperature. I'm going to drop it down to 265 degrees Fahrenheit. Why am I doing that? Because we're going on to 100% polyester. If we were going on to 100% cotton, then basically we could leave the temperature the same and just do everything at one temperature. But the more polyester content that you have in the material, the more you have to drop the temperature. After all, this is where the low temp gets its name. Why do we do that? Because if you've ever worked with trying to put a transfer onto anything that's polyester, if a shirt gets too hot or the material gets too hot, you might run into a symptom that we refer to as dye migration. In other words, the heat drives the dyes out of your polyester fabric and bleeds them into the transfer that you have on the surface. So if your material distorts, all the colors on the surface are going to distort. Also, whenever we've done sublimation, I'm assuming some of you have, whenever you sublimate a t-shirt, you got to go between 385 to 400 degrees. And sometimes, no matter how much you try, the paper makes an indention in the shirt, or the heat press makes an indention in the shirt. Well, that's because we're heating the polyester at such a high temperature, we're reshaping the polyester. However, using the low temp process, by getting our temperature down to 265, it's not hot enough to reshape polyester. So hopefully not only am I going to get this design on the shirt, but it's not going to have any press border or outline. Wouldn't that be slick? Let's give it a shot. I'm going to go ahead and take my Vapor Apparel shirt, which happens to be a medium, by the way.
Uh-oh, that's mine.
Uh-huh.
That's mine.
Yeah, we're going to make this shirt for my favorite space monkey. All right. Let's go ahead and put the shirt on the platen. And I just want to square it up, so to speak. Okay. You know what I'm missing? My favorite thing in the world, a sticky lint roller. Okay. If I had one, I would be using a sticky lint roller right now on this shirt.
In the corner. That's where all the supplies are now.
It's here. Okay. Whew, Sprite, I was about to have a panic. Thank you so much. Yes. Let's lint roll that area that's going to be underneath. I'm going to put a protective sheet down. This is just a piece of parchment paper, nothing fancy, not yet. I'm just going to drop the platen on the material for a few seconds so I can smooth out the area that I'm planning on decorating. Now, let's take my two splits and let's put them on the shirt. Okay. Now, I know what you're thinking. Can you do that at the same time? No. We're going to put one split down and then the other. But what I want to do is kind of line them up, so to speak, just to see where the image is going to appear. Okay. So there is going to be my first split. Now, I could use a couple of pieces of heat tape just to make sure that the split doesn't move. And I'm just going to put one piece down to demonstrate. But since we only have 50 minutes, sometimes You just have to wing it, if you know what I mean. Okay, so let's put a piece of parchment paper as a protective sheet. Okay, right now my press is at about 280. We're just going to go ahead and go for it. So we're going to press it at 280 degrees. Normally I would like this down to about 260. You can go as low as 240. We're going to press it for about 10-15 seconds. We don't have to do a lot of time with the first press. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my shirt over to my table. And I am going to use this cool piece of aluminum that Sprite used in her presentation. And we're going to use the aluminum to A, rapidly cool the design, and B, do some shameless plugging for my show. Thank you, Millers. Okay. So what we want to do is roll that design off like so. Looking good so far, Sprite. Now let's go ahead and put the second design down. So there's the first half. Let's take the second half. And this is why we wanted that wide split. Like I said, because it essentially creates a jigsaw effect that makes it much easier to align. Now, if this were a straight line and we slightly misaligned our print, it'd look pretty bobo. But with the jigsaw pattern, basically, if we do make a slight mistake, it's hard for the naked eye to pick it up. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm reaching into my bag of matte silicone sheets. So I could use a matte silicone sheet to protect that first side. We're going to cover. And now we're going to press the second side. Again, we're only going to go about 10-15 seconds. Essentially, what we want to do is just quickly bond the emulsion to the fiber. But once we get the second side off, we'll do our finishing press with the matte silicone sheet. We'll matte everything out. It'll look awesome. Okay. Let's get it off the heat press. Let's put it on the table. Hope everyone can see it. Let's take out the heat. Thank you, Millers. All right. Now let's remove this second side. And look at that. Oh, baby, just you shut your mouth. All right.
Leave it there. I want to show them how glossy it is.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the side that we hit with the matte silicone sheet. This is when we first peel away the forever low temp film. You'll notice the gloss. We've got a gloss finishing sheet that will keep this shine, but the finishing sheet basically allows the emulsion to drive in, so to speak. It adds to durability. Or we can go with the matte finish here by just using a second matte sheet. So go ahead and get my design down. One matte sheet. 2 matte sheets. Now, when it comes to the matte silicone sheets, you know, people have often asked me, well, how many times can you use one? As long as no toner is bonding on them, you can use them for an infinite amount of presses. But I would probably say you're going to get in the neighborhood of about 4 to 6 presses with your silicone sheet before you have to replace it with a fresh one. You replace it when you see toner accumulating on it. But until then, you don't have to worry. Now, doing my finishing press here, I'm going to go for 30 seconds. But basically, once I pull this shirt off, unlike some transfers that you might have to let sit for a while and cure, with this process, you could basically wear it right out the door. Okay, and I'm going to lay it on the table for a second to show the finished result. How about that? So there is Forever Low Temp Laser Dark on 100% microfiber polyester. Okay, let me go ahead and take this shirt, throw it into the gallery. All right, let's get to work on our next project.
You only have 4 minutes.
I only have 4 minutes. Oh my goodness. Well, let's do a white t-shirt then. We could do it real quick.
So wait a second, they want to see the holes in the shirt.
Okay.
Well, hurry up and do your white thing too.
Well, I tell you what, instead of doing some whites, maybe I could show some whites, some results that I've done previous.
My shirt.
Give me an overhead, Sprite.
Yes, sir. Oh, running back and forth.
Why is that upside down? Oh, because I'm upside down. All right. Just to kind of show some of the results that you can get with a white toner system. I am really into music. I like it. So I did some album covers of some of my favorite 90s albums and put them on a collection of t-shirts. Now you'll notice that they've all got the screening effect. This was actually screened for bright, meaning I put it on a white shirt. So the black prints solid, but as the color gets lighter, the more the screening effect comes into play. Here's another album cover, Green Day, a classic. Again, screened for bright, which means going onto a white shirt. But one thing I wanted to point out here is all the little intricate details that are in this particular album cover, all these little hand-drawn designs, all weeded out beautifully with the process. One of my favorite bands of all time, Radiohead, the OK Computer album. Again, this little strip here, that's actually part of the design. But as you will see right here in the areas where the graphic was white, the rip knocked out the color or knocked out the white. So I don't feel any base here or any emulsion. All I feel is the shirt. And it's basically done with the simple command saying print to bright media. Now, when it comes to color media, my suggestion is using the Micromask. Now here, for this album cover, I demonstrated the line Micromask. I set the frequency, the Micromask percentage, at 20%. Don't be afraid to Micromask large areas like this. The one thing I love about the line raster, especially with the angle set to 0, if we pull this shirt, the design stretches and snaps back into place. In other words, there's no cracking as if this were printed as one solid film. So like I said, it's a cool looking effect. It helps add to the longevity. This shirt here, what we did was we used Forever Low Temp Laser Dark and just put a black design down and then came over the top of that design with some hot stamp foil to create this cool Chemical Brothers shirt. And to show you some of the darker ones, this is a mashup of the Use Your Illusions album covers by Guns N' Roses. Since we told the rip that we were screening for dark, this area here that's black, there is no print. That is the shirt. So the darker the color, the more the raster, the lighter the color, less raster. Here's the album cover for Rage Against the Machine. Now, the one thing to notice here is how a lot of the design trails off. This could have been solid fill, but what I did is I used the shadow tolerance to knock out this excess black that I didn't necessarily need to print. So what it does is it gives the flames this cool effect. And finally, just to let you know that love is what I got, Sublime. Now, as you'll notice here, again, with the shadow tolerance, catching the edge in these pixels as opposed to dropping out. These areas that appear black, they were knocked out by the rip. All you feel is the shirt color. And by opening up the design, so to speak, you know, again, the pinholes get smaller, the wider the area, the pinholes get bigger, the darker the area. But it allows the design to flex, it allows the design to breathe. And then finally, love this graphic. Dog Days of Summer, again, printed as a single color design, composite black, done with the Forever Low Temp Laser Dark, and then laid 2 different colors of foil to get the effect.
I think I made that shirt.
I think you did. So what should have been a better demonstration on the Doug18432WT, but the reality is this printer can do so much, it's hard to demonstrate it in 50 minutes. I hope to see everyone back on the road at some point soon. Well, we'll be in a town near you where you can drop on by and see it in action from yours truly. Now, before I go, I want to let people know we are offering a special, open house special, and it'll be good through next week, where you get the printer and all your startup consumables. You get 2 packs of Forever Low Temp 11x17. You get your silicone sheets, and we'll even throw in what I consider to be the Photoshop Bible, artwork for white toner transfers written by Dane Clement, Great Dane Graphics. He presented earlier today. This is literally the step-by-step how-to on setting up your designs in Photoshop to optimize with the rip in the system. We're going to include all that for the base price of $7,240. If you need more details, get in touch with your Condy Systems account manager and let us know. Again, when it comes to your questions, I'll go ahead and try to answer them as best I can through the Hoova app, try to have those answers for you in 24 hours. And don't forget, I tackle this and other subjects every other Tuesday on the T-shirt transfer paper power half hour. It goes off at 3:30 p.m. Central Time, and it's hosted by Condy Systems. So make sure you follow it, make sure you like it, make sure you comment, make sure you give me those 100p emojis. So I guess since my time is up, this has been our demonstration on the 8432WT white toner printer and Forever Transfer Rip. If you have any questions, let us know. Until then, I'm Doug DeWitt, Transfer Paper Product Manager at Condy Systems. My time is up, and I thank you for yours.